The Wheel of Time is a show that has a mammoth mission ahead of it. Beginning to adapt a 15-book story that is engaging and understandable for newcomers, while still appealing to those die-hard fans who love and cherish the series, well, it's not a task that I envy. And I think it's one that's impossible to pull off perfectly. So, as we begin this episode-by-episode breakdown, I ask that you take a few things into account. I am viewing this adaptation as another turning of the wheel. What does that mean? In other words, as long as the show keeps the main identity of the story with the same overall themes and characters and general plot, I will be happy. This, hopefully, will allow me to enjoy the changes to the source material, hopefully without getting hung up on small, tiny details. The main thing I want going into this is for the show to capture the essence of the series, to be well written in its own right, and really just let more people experience the world that Robert Jordan has created. I'll even go as far to say that it could even be better than the books in some areas. It might. I'm also coming from the perspective of someone who has only read the first 2 books and is now reading the 3rd one. So I won't pick up on how some of the nuanced changes to characters early on will impact them further down the line. But that's perfectly fine, because this will be a spoiler-free discussion for the later books. We're only going to be talking about the episode in question as I review it. I do hopefully understand the Wheel of Time at its core though. I understand the main ideas of the story, and that's what I want to bring to you. The purpose of this series is to look at the storytelling, the structure, the writing craft of this show, and to really just talk about what it gets right, what it gets wrong, to hopefully inform myself, you guys, and whoever else who is listening on how to create a moving story. And with all that out of the way, I hope you are all sitting comfortably with a cup of coffee or a tea, or even maybe a biscuit, because it is now time to roll the intro and dive into this review. Let's go.
Oh, sing of my Nethorin. Oh, weep for the blood of Aemon. Oh, cry for my Nethorin. Long ago.
The world is broken.
The show opens with a Lord of the Rings style expository monologue. However, unlike that opening, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. Moiraine talks about a supposed dangerous individual called the Dragon, and how she's trying to find them. Rosamund Pike, as Moiraine, has a terrific screen presence, and her voice has an almost ethereal tone to it. The swish and donning of her blue coat is cool, but again, this scene is quite cliche in terms of openings. And to make matters worse, all of this could have been explained later on in a far more natural way. I have a similar complaint with the next scene, which has 2 unimportant men running away from some women wearing red. The shots of the scenery are stunning, and the reveal that there is only one man through the line,
Who are you talking about? There's no one else here.
which by the way is delivered really effectively, serves only the purpose of revealing that men can go mad if they channel magic, and that the Red Lady people are sketchy. None of this is important until at least episode 2, and there must have been a better way of revealing that men go crazy than the way that this scene did it. Maybe they should have used the opening from the novel, which does this in a way that is far more grand. The scene isn't necessarily awful, but it's just very out of place. If the idea was that the original opening from the novel would be too cheesy and scare away Game of Thrones fans, I'm sorry, but this unneeded scene is as corny as you can get. We then pan up to Moiraine and Lan, who begin to head towards a place called the Two Rivers. I do like that the obvious condescension of Liandrin, the main red lady, sets a contrast between the different Aes Sedai. Now, I'll come back to these two later, but their dynamic makes you believe that Moiraine and Lan are incredibly close, even though we haven't seen their past yet. Before we move on though, I will just say that a cold open, or just an opening scene of a show, should be a showcase of what that show is and what it is capable of. The opening of The Wheel of Time is the worst part of episode 1, which is a shame, but at the same time, it's not completely terrible, and, well, it's only upward from here. What follows is a wide shot that presents a gorgeous ravine, scattered with mountains that look suspiciously like skyscrapers. This is an awesome bit of subtle narrative storytelling, and was the first part of this show that felt unique, and gave a hint of how an adaptation could potentially handle Robert Jordan's material in a fresh but faithful light. We then cut to the Wheel of Time logo, one that I'm pretty neutral on. It gets the whole wheel idea across well, and it differentiates itself pretty well from other logos in the fantasy genre, I suppose, so it's alright.
Be strong.
After the logo, we are then presented with a bunch of women marching through yet again some lovely scenery. It turns out that they are engaged in a ritual which will allow Egwene, one of our main characters, to get her first braid and join the women's circle. YouTuber Amanda the Jedi pointed out in her video with Daniel Green that the set of 3 groups of women, good, bad and neutral, that we've seen so far, was likely an intentional choice, which lets the audience know that this will be a series where its female cast will take centre stage, which I think is something of note. And before we move on to the actual scene, I think it's very interesting that the show chose Egwene to be the first main character that we're introduced to after Moiraine. But moving on, I love the costumes here, and the braids, they're just perfect. There's a sense of culture and unity to this group that just screams Two Rivers. Egwene and Nynaeve share a moment together, hinting at their close sisterly dynamic, but even here Nynaeve is keeping the distance that needs to be there, with her being the wisdom. She then pushes poor Egwene off the cliff, where she flails around in the water before Egwene decides to trust the river, as Nynaeve told her, and coincidentally then everything calms down. Ooh. This whole scene introduces Egwene's connection to Nynaeve, introduces Egwene herself, and also her affinity to the One Power, almost effortlessly. What follows is a much shorter adaptation of the first chapter of the Eye of the World book, with Rand and his father Tam heading down a mountain towards Emond's Field. It's a quick scene, but it establishes that Tam is a kind yet stoic father figure, and that Rand is quite reserved but sweet, through the story of him taking a berry to Egwene when they were kids. Through this story, it connects the scene to the previous one, and immediately establishes the small village romance between the two, even though Egwene and Rand haven't even shared a scene yet. It also begins hinting of a threat, with Rand sensing a disturbance and aiming his bow into the trees, as well as also hinting that he may be able to sense things that others cannot. Or maybe he just knows the forest well because he's grown up there, I don't know. Emond's Field itself, though, is a lively village with an almost sickeningly wholesome vibe. I love the friendship and connection between the 3 boys, Mat, Rand and Perrin. They feel like they have been friends for life, as Mat teases the others, revealing that Perrin is married, and Rand asks after Mat's sisters, which again builds the connection and also shows that Mat has a family, which will become important later on. Big props to Barney Harris and the writers for making Mat incredibly charismatic, yet also a little bit shady right away. It's also established that there is a war going on in the south, but more importantly, Mat shrugs off the rumours of this war just as if it's nothing more than a rumour. This establishes as well that these people truly are isolated from the world and they feel immune to its horrors. This is also the perfect time to mention the ethnically diverse cast from within the Two Rivers itself. It is yet another hint at the lore of Robert Jordan's world, and that something has occurred that has made society multicultural in ethnicity, although perhaps that's not the best word to use because this is all one culture, it's just that the folks look different. Moving on though, Egwene enters the tavern and everyone is thrilled with her achievement, as to be expected, especially Rand. But call me crazy, but the camera lingers on Perrin's face just slightly too long as Egwene comes in. We'll get back to that point later, but first let's cut to the next scene, which skips to the Winespring Inn at nighttime. The first thing I noticed in this scene was the tension between Rand and Egwene. They share a glance, and through Perrin's prodding, it's revealed that the two haven't talked yet. Before we are left to mull over why this might be, the door of the inn opens and a hooded stranger enters. The stranger removes his hood, announcing himself as
Lan Moiraine,
before announcing the arrival of Moiraine. She then enters, the background behind her blurred. My logical brain is slightly miffed by the fact that neither of these intruders are wet from the rain outside. The scene is also very melodramatic, but it works. I especially love how Nynaeve immediately goes to confront Lan, linking these two together and characterizing her as headstrong, even if she is very much out of her depth. The fact that Moiraine just completely ignores Nynaeve also got a chuckle out of me as well. Egwene's mother lets everyone know that Moiraine is an Aes Sedai, despite the fact that Moiraine clearly showed her ring discreetly. Moiraine then surveys each of our main characters for reasons that will soon become clear before she and Lan are escorted away. It's a solid introduction for the Water and Aes Sedai. Rosamund Pike's portrayal of Moraine's ageless wisdom can already be seen, and I love that. She holds not only our attention, but also that of everyone in the tavern, making it clear that this occurrence is unusual. Nynaeve then comes up to the two boys and tells Perrin to go and see his wife, and again, Perrin's gaze lingers on Egwene. He tells them to give Egwene his best, which could be taken as him simply being friendly, but it's the second time the show has directed him specifically to look at Egwene, and this time it's directly juxtaposed with talking about his wife, Laila, who, by the way, he isn't married to in the books. It becomes clear that Laila is worried about something, and Perrin calms her. I wonder what she could be concerned about. Well, we'll talk about that later, but we do see the two in bed together later, both Perrin and Laila, and she reaches for his hand, so I don't think their marriage is toxic, and I don't think Perrin is looking to cheat on her. But I do think that Nynaeve is aware that there is some sort of fracture in their marriage, which may explain Perrin's behaviour. Moving on, Mat's parents are made clear to be pretty terrible people, and as a result, he has to look after his sisters. I love this focus because Mat's internal struggle of not becoming like his dad, in combination with his love for his little sisters, makes him such a compelling character, and much more earlier on than in the books. We cut back to the tavern, where Egwene and Rand are cleaning up with their parents. Tam hints at his worldliness, with an informed comment about Aes Sedai, before he and Egwene's mother leave the two romantics alone. They flirt for a bit, despite the fact that Egwene clearly has something on her mind, and there's a nice moment that calls back to the beginning of the episode, where Rand gives her a berry like he did when he was a boy. This act continues to reinforce Rand's naturally kind but also pensive nature, and Egwene's bemused reaction likewise continues to build up their dynamic. This is just as well as Rand and Egwene get to it and a scene occurs off screen. I'm fine with this change to the books, as in this adaptation they are in their early 20s, so it would be weird if they were still all coy about their feelings for each other. Skipping forward a bit, Egwene reveals to Rand that Nynaeve has asked if she wants her to be her apprentice, and this hits Rand pretty hard, although Egwene hasn't made up her mind yet. This explains why she was so anxious to talk to him before. As Rand says,
"It's a lonely life. Being in wisdom."
Being Nynaeve's apprentice means she and Rand won't live a life together. The acting here is on point, with both of them clearly being conflicted over this turn of events. A few scenes later, they meet again in a stunning hillside, where Rand muses at their potential life together, even though it is made clear that Egwene has chosen the path of a wisdom. Egwene is clearly ambitious, and up to this point, she is kind of like the main character of the show. She's gotten more screen time than any of the other young people. I love that Moiraine and Lan share a bath here. However, unlike the previous scene, there's no sexual tension here. Lan's actor Daniel Henney has quoted his character's relationship with Moiraine as like marriage but without the good stuff, and that totally comes across here. Their mission is brought up again, with Lan asking which one in relation to who the dragon is, proving again that the opening scene was not needed. It could have been slowly trickled out through the episode. But check this fade design out though. Damn! The fade looks really freaking terrifying, I've got to say. Both these elements, both Moiraine and the fade, are linked later when she asks Lan, "Do you think one of the eyeless is already here?" Not only does this build tension over the threat to come, but it continues to establish that the bond between Aes Sedai and her warder, by cleverly only having Moiraine speak, yet clearly they can read each other's thoughts or feelings to a degree. Let's now just move slightly to talk about the introduction of my favourite side character, and that is Padan Fain. The grin, the overly cheery laugh that is masking something clearly sinister underneath. I love it. Johann Myers is killing it in the role. My brother, who has not read the books at all, commented on his cart and the kids running alongside it as being like Gandalf, which, I mean, he's not wrong. And the show was clearly going for that connection, but no, Fain is not Gandalf. I love the interaction between Fain and Matt, as they are both clearly sketchy, and Matt has stolen the bracelet from a woman that he interacted with earlier. I'll just put some pictures up now for you. And if we go forward just a bit, it's revealed that Matt wanted to buy some candles for his sister, making him even more of a nuanced character. He's doing it for a good reason. And then the awkwardness of him being unable to refuse money from Rand and Perrin for the candle because they know he's lost a lot of money from the gambling, when he has already acquired them through sketchy means, is just brilliant writing. And before we get to the crux of the episode, we've got to talk about this confrontation between Nynaeve and Moiraine. The clear power imbalance, as represented through the staging here, is clearly being shown. Moiraine's snobbishness as what she sees as peasants' work that Nynaeve is doing when she is a leader in the town, and Nynaeve's angry responses is all great. I particularly love how Moiraine misdirects Nynaeve into thinking about her capability when she is really trying to find out her age for, let's say, dragon reasons. All of the dialogue here is exposition, yes, that's true, but it works well because it's also done in character and is character building, and also sets up the dynamic between these two very headstrong and intense characters. The bit about the previous wisdom being turned away, I have to say, is definitely not as Nynaeve describes it. It's a good bit of motivation for why she hates Aes Sedai, but the young wisdom was probably turned away because of her lack of ability, and Nynaeve has let that story fester over time to make her hate Aes Sedai. This is also a good time to mention that I have mixed feelings on the Dragon Reborn potentially being not just a man like in the books. I do like showrunner Rafe Judkins' argument that old prophecies are untrustworthy and it doesn't really change the story fundamentally, because it just means that if the dragon is a man, the Aes Sedai will freak out because Saidin still corrupts, but if it's a woman, that will just make things easier. And it also fits with the whole who's the dragon vibe, which the show is doing quite well so far and really is making them being able to explore the cast, the entire cast, in a much more even way than the first book. The execution of the material post book 2 will reveal if the change was a smart move to create intrigue, because it could just be an unnecessary gimmick that upon reflection seems like they just shoehorned the change in the lore there just to create unneeded suspense for the first season. Nynaeve and Egwene listening to the wind going wrong, and the slaughter of sheep in the shape of a fang, I think, really ramped up the idea that the axe is about to fall. All this foreshadowing to the massacre that's about to ensue makes the dramatic tonal shift not as jarring as it could be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that, we have my favourite scene in this episode probably, which is the candle lighting scene of Tine, with Tam explaining, in reference to Rand's mother, that the point of the festival is to guide spirits back to their loved ones. From here, Tam goes into a soothing monologue about the wheel of time itself, which, combined with the villagers putting their own candles or lanterns into the water, and the track fittingly titled Lanterns then playing over, all creates a mystical atmosphere and just a brilliant scene.
All we can do is the best we can with the life that's given to us. But no matter what happens, the wheel keeps turning.
A few of the characters in this scene, such as Nynaeve, are seen crying. Is this an indication that they've lost someone? And will that be important later? I honestly don't know. Like, seriously, I don't know. But this scene as a whole is not only the calm before the storm, but is pure high fantasy. The festival dance begins soon after, with all the Emmons Fielders dancing merrily, while Moiraine and Lan fret about some sort of danger that's coming. And Moiraine says she doesn't know which one it is. Egwene starts dancing with a boy named Tom before the poor guy gets a literal knife in the back, which inadvertently saves Egwene's life. But the music then fades out, which is followed by an eerie hum, and chaos ensues. In an instant, the jovial scene becomes a slaughter, with Trollocs coming from all directions and attacking the poor villagers. Props to the costume, makeup and CGI department. The Trollocs look appropriately terrifying and are not just computer-generated copies of one another. The Hobbit, the shaky cam, does wonders for instilling fear and disorientates the audience, as Egwene must be feeling as she flails around, before Nynaeve rushes to her side and they run away. Padan Fain just waltzes away as if nothing is happening, while Perrin and Laila try to rescue people by taking them to their blacksmiths. There is an incredible moment here where Matt, after realizing that his good-for-nothing parents have lost the girls, runs through the chaos in an intense tracking shot. It's really good stuff and very, very tense. And I also love the bit when a Trolloc on 4 legs, oh my, 4 legs, attacks Nynaeve and Egwene, but they manage to keep up the fight until the monster gets ripped apart by just a stream of magic, and then the lock of the camera on Moiraine as she harnesses the magic of weaving after saving the women is simply epic. I have no other words to describe it. And so is the incredible choreography between her and Lan as they fight together in sync. Him protecting her as she uses the elements against the attacking horde, eventually bringing down part of the inn in a cloud of dust. The special effects here are really solid. Not perfect, but much better than, for example, The Witcher was in its first season. Not even a blade to her chest can stop Moiraine, although I'm sure that wound will have consequences later on. For now though, Moiraine is unable to stop a Trolloc from yeeting Nynaeve into the air and in a heart-stopping moment drags her away. This moment, I think, is more supposed to really break Egwene down than make the audience think that Nynaeve is actually dead. Some of the Emmons-filled women do team up to fight a Trolloc in a cheesy yet, I think, pretty appropriate moment as well. Quickly, let's just cut back to Rand and Tam, where Narg, who may not be Narg, you know if you know, turns up and tries to kill them. Tam unsheathes his heron-marked blade and takes on Narg in a showing of sword expertise that could only be done by someone who has had extensive training in the blade, even if that training was years ago. Tam is injured, but Rand steps in and saves him. I left this part of the fight till last, as it is the most dramatic. If you didn't know, I'm of course talking about Perrin accidentally killing his wife Laila. This moment certainly won me over in the shock factor, and Perrin breaking down after realizing what he has done. Oh wow, it's just too real. But let's analyze the scene for a moment. This does not occur in the books. The reason that it occurred was to jumpstart Perrin's character arc of avoiding violence and being afraid that he's going to hurt people with his temper, especially as a visual cue for the show being a visual medium. The choice for Perrin to have a wife at all also fits in line with the conscious decision of the show to be a bit more mature. Same goes for Rand and Egwene's furthered relationship. However, the introducing of Laila just to kill her, it falls into the fridging trope just a bit too much for me, which if you didn't know is when a character, usually a woman, is created and then killed off purely for the purpose of furthering another character's arc, which is usually a man. I agree with Brandon Sanderson that it probably should have been one of Perrin's blacksmith mentors from the books that got killed. Yes, it wouldn't have been as emotionally shocking, but it would have gotten the same idea across. Quickly though, what do you guys think of the theory that Laila was actually a darkfriend? That would explain why she was so skittish earlier, as she knows what is to come, and the fact that she holds an axe above Perrin's head before she is killed is a big plus for this theory. And then if she is a dark friend, her turn may be related to something that hurt the couple's relationship, something that Nynaeve is aware of. This show specifically shows Perrin hugging her stomach. I'm just spitting ideas out here, but whatever the truth is, the show has now placed a large burden on itself to make that choice of killing Laila feel earned and make the consequences be dramatic enough to make that choice feel like it was needed. And how Perrin grows from it in the coming episodes and seasons will be the decider for that. The town is in ruins as Rand pulls up to it, a hurt Tam in tow. Some very important moments occur for Rand in the journey between his house and the village in the book, so I really hope that the show shows this to us through through a flashback later on, because we don't get any of that in this episode. In the meantime, Egwene embraces Rand and reveals that Nynaeve has been taken. Perrin walks out of his house absolutely shattered as he carries Laila's body, and Moiraine manages to heal Tam to the detriment of her health. Rand then gets understandably angry at Moiraine for being the harbinger of death before she reveals her mission. She explains that one of them is the Dragon Reborn, which they respond with absolute bewilderment, as you do.
You fully lost your mind.
She tells them that if they don't go and leave now, the whole village will die.
We leave now.
And so they follow her and they leave. This is much faster paced than the books, probably for runtime reasons. There are barely any goodbyes, however I think this show just makes it work. Egwene has lost Nynaeve, and so her future is uncertain, and Perrin has no place to make any decisions. He's just too broken, and Matt wants to protect his sisters. All of them, of course, want to protect the village, and they can't exactly argue with Moiraine, who in this adaptation thinks that they all could be the dragon, and thus wants them all to come. Rand's motivation for leaving is not nearly as strong as the others though, although a nod of approval from Tam helps just a little. I am seeing a pattern here of the show trying to focus more on the whole ensemble, but in doing so it's leaving Rand out quite a bit, who is the viewpoint character of the first book. There's also the fact that in this version of the story we are directly shown how devastating the creatures of the dark are, so I do buy the fact that they need to get out of there to prevent another attack that's just as bad. There is also the absence of Nynaeve, who would be a ferocious driving force against leaving. So I do think the ending here is quite rushed, but upon rewatch, if you forget what happens in the book, it does just work because of the setup. The episode ends with our characters riding away as the Trollocs can be seen marching in the hills behind them. Deciding to end the episode with Moiraine monologuing the opening to the books was a structurally pleasing way to close off, especially with the final line opening up all the stories to come.
There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Time.
So, was it good? Yeah, of course it was. Those saying that this is a travesty and is worth a 1 or a 2 or a 3 out of 10 are just, well, they're plain wrong. There are problems here, mostly stemming from either changes to the book that we are yet to see paid off, or structural issues of setting so much in just 50 minutes. The episode is probably too quick and is a bit janky because of it, but apart from the beginning, there is no specific section or scene of this episode where the negative elements outweigh the good. The locations, the landscape shots, the music, most of the dialogue even, it's all promising stuff. The best part though, and in my opinion was the element that would either make or break the show, is the acting. Every main cast member perfectly embodies their characters, especially Madeline Madden as Egwene, Rosamund Pike as Moiraine, and Barney Harris as Matt so far. My rating for this episode will probably change depending on how well the show justifies some of its most bizarre choices, but at the moment I'm feeling optimistic. And seeing as the show had to set up so much, I think it did a pretty good job with what it was given. So with that being said, I will give episode 1 of The Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime, Leavetaking, an 8 out of 10. Thank you all very much for watching. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If I edit this correctly, it's going to be my longest one to date, and hopefully one of my best videos as well. If you have liked it, think about giving it a like and maybe even subscribing or even clicking that bell. I'm really excited to be making more videos. I had exams recently, so that's why there was almost no content, and then I got sick, so that put a spanner in the works. But we're back, we're ready, and it's time to make some Wheel of Time content. I'm excited, and I hope you guys are too. But with all that out of the way, my name is Jasper, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye. Hey.